Today I will be building Steve Rogers in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. The main thing I wanted to focus on with Captain America was his leadership and his ability to inspire others, so I've worked in some support abilities to represent that. In terms of combat, this build will be focused on unarmed melee strikes, and will be designed to be effective as a tank. I've also made a homebrew version of his iconic shields, which I will cover later in the video. Captain America is, of course, a human, which gives us an increase in 2 ability scores, as well as a skill and a feat, all of which I will talk about later on. I've built the character to be level 6, but I'm going to go through step by step so that you can scale to whatever level you want. The first 3 levels are going into Fighter, which gives us abilities like Action Surge and Second Wind to help with survivability and damage output, as well as a fighting style, for which I took Protection, but Defense would also work. Then we get a Martial Archetype. This build uses mainly unarmed strikes, which means that the champion's improved critical will not work, essentially ruling out that choice. So I went with Battlemaster. As a Battlemaster, we will get to choose some maneuvers, and for making your decision you will want to take into account that a lot of the options state that you need to be using a weapon for them to work. This build will include some weapons, but is designed to use unarmed strikes a lot too. So I would suggest that you don't just take weapon-based maneuvers. The 3 that I took are Commanding Strike, Parry, and Rally. Next, we will be putting 3 levels into Monk, which will help buff our unarmed strikes to make them a little more of a realistic combat choice. From these levels, we get the features Unarmored Defense and Unarmored Movement, which won't be relevant to this character because we will be using armor and a shield. But we also gain Martial Arts, which allows us to use Dexterity for unarmed strikes, and allows us to make additional strikes as bonus actions. Then we get some Key Points, which can be used to make even more unarmed strikes, or for defense purposes through things like Deflect Missiles. Finally, we have a Monastic Tradition, for which I took the Way of the Open Hand, which gives us some additional abilities when using Unarmed Strike that increase the amount of control we have over opponents. That brings the character up to level 6. I was close to adding a level into Bard in order to get Bardic Inspiration and a couple of other buff spells, but they are kind of undercut by Martial Arts taking up our bonus actions. For any additional levels, you have the choice of investing more into Monk or Fighter. Both options will get you extra attack, which is probably the most important thing moving forward. Fighter levels give you more hit points, which helps for the tanky build, and you will gain more maneuvers, as well as better superiority dice. But Monk offers what I think are better abilities for this character. As you increase, you will gain good defensive skills like self-healing and immunity to poison and disease, as well as some more key points to spend on new abilities. I personally would go for Monk levels from here for any level ups you get. In addition to the class levels, I have created a homebrew ability for the character at level 6 to make the build feel more unique. The ability is called I Can Do This All Day, and triggers when the character drops 2 or below 0 HP. Instead of going down as normal, the character will remain up on the amount of HP equal to 1d10 plus their player level, and they may immediately take an opportunity attack against the target that downed them if they are within range. This ability can be used once per long rest. For equipment, we will be using the Fighter starting gear, and the first choice is Armour. Cap's armour varies a bit, but I would say it fits into the category of medium. But since that's not an option, take the leather armour, and try to get some medium armour as soon as you can. Then we will take a martial weapon and a shield. The martial weapon doesn't matter really since we won't be using it, but the shield does. Next we will take the light crossbow. Cap is shown to use a variety of firearms, which in my head kind of equates to crossbows. The character is built more around up-close combat, but it's useful to have a ranged weapon just in case. Finally, take an explorer's pack. I've made some homebrew rules for Cap's shields that I'll go over here as well. First of all is the iconic round Captain America shield, which I am basing on the rules for any other shield and adding a couple of new features. Firstly, when the shield is equipped, the first unarmed strike the player makes each turn gains +4 to damage. And secondly, the shield may be thrown, making a ranged attack against a target within 20 feet, dealing 1d8 damage. I was unsure whether to make this slashing or bludgeoning damage. An item like that would definitely cut through people, but the way it acts in films and comics is more like a bludgeoning attack, so in the end that's what I've gone for. A successful hit with the shield will allow it to bounce back and be caught, provided the creature is solid enough for it to. An unsuccessful hit will lead to the shield bouncing elsewhere, or missing entirely depending on how bad the roll is. The other shield I've made rules for is the Wakandan shield that we see in Avengers Infinity War, although I'm not sure I would describe them as shields. They look more like pointed wrist guards, and they are used almost exclusively as offensive weapons, which is why I am classing them as monk weapons. These weapons have the property light, meaning that they can be used for 2-weapon fighting, and they deal 1d6 bludgeoning damage. The weapons can be worn as wrist guards without being in their attack mode, and can be readied to be used in combat without the use of an action or bonus action, making them useful as backup weapons. Wearing a Wakandan shield prevents another shield from being worn on the same hand, and the player cannot hold items in their hands while using the shields as weapons. These items also don't offer protection, meaning you will have to choose between their increased damage output or the better defense of the American shield. Captain America is one of those characters that qualifies as being highly skilled with basically every ability score, so I'm only taking into account what's good for the build when assigning them. Dexterity is going to want to be your highest. It's going to be used in combat for attacking and to boost our armor class. Next, prioritise Constitution to improve our health to keep the build as tanky as possible. After that, Wisdom will be needed. It is useful for a couple of abilities that the character will have, but it also needs to be kept above 13 along with Dexterity in order to multiclass into Monk. Then Strength will be useful to help with abilities like Athletics, and finally Charisma and Intelligence are not going to be very important. The choice of background is pretty clear. Captain America is a soldier. If you're wanting to play Cap at a specific point in time, then maybe Folk Hero could work, but Soldier seems like the better choice to me. The personality traits I chose are on screen, and for alignment, I think Steve Rogers is lawful good. If you're looking to more reflect Captain America in things like Civil War or Winter Soldier, then maybe Chaotic Good will fit better, but it's up to you to decide how you want to play. In terms of playstyle, the character is built to act as a tank. You have good health and high armor class, allowing you to survive a lot in close combat. You have relatively powerful unarmed strikes to use up close, and the option of crossbows or a shield throw for range, as well as a couple of leadership-based maneuvers for buffing other members of your party. Finally, I'm going to assign the skills and feats that have been built up while making the character. Firstly, we have Athletics and Intimidation from the Soldier background, and gain 2 more skills from the Fighter class, for which I took Acrobatics and Survival. Then I took Stealth for the skill given by the Human Race. We gain 1 feat from our Human Race, and 2 more from ability score increases. I went for Medium Armor Master to make us even more tanky, then Shield Master to allow for some additional combat options. Finally, if you have a high enough charisma, then Inspiring Leader is a good option to help buff the other members of your party. If not, then Tough will be useful to increase your hit points. That's the character done. If you'd like to see the character sheet, then click the link in the description, and there is also a link to a playlist of the other characters from Marvel that I've made in Dungeons & Dragons.